Things are starting to heat up, and it's not just because we're getting to the end, or the middle, I should say, of April. It's because Penn State football in the back half of spring practice starting to make some strides for the class of 2026 in recruiting. And as always, the people who break that down, Sean Fitz and Ryan Snyder, are recruiting reporters over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Some of the best in the business that know the most. They can give you all the context of these stories. So, Ryan, thank you for being here as always. And can you tell us about the latest Nittany Lion joining the program?
Yeah, Darrell Carey, safety prospect out of DeMatha. 6'2", 185 pounds. Just update his profile today, T. Frank. So if you have 180 on there, that is on me, which, never mind. We have the rankings, so forget that. But consensus 3-star prospect at all 4 major recruiting sites. You know, this is a player that Penn State offered last November. And really, it's been pretty cut and dry. There's not a whole lot to discuss as far as visits and all those sorts of things. He came to Penn State twice, attended the Ohio State game last November. And I think probably around January, we started to get a pretty good sense that he's pretty high on Penn State's board. You know, shout out to Sean. Sean had him on the big board in February when, you know, I don't think we were discussing Carey a ton then. He certainly was in the mix, but that was a pretty good scoop on his part as far as figuring out how high he was on Penn State's board. Carey had a pretty solid January, picked up quite a few offers, and quickly kind of narrowed his list down to Oregon, Penn State, Maryland, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. Sure enough, takes visit number 2 last weekend, and boom, here we are with a commitment. So I think a lot of things point in Penn State's favor as far as their production with safety. I think that was a massive part in Darrell kind of saying, you know what, I don't need to do all these visits. I don't need to take these official visits. I don't need to go all over the place. I have a good feel for where I want to be. DeMatha obviously has a pretty strong history with Penn State. Although I didn't realize it, I think KJ Winston was their last. Obviously, of course, LeVar Keys. I don't want to overlook that. His teammate, 2026. But doesn't hurt when
on the roster.
It doesn't hurt when their last commitment or their last signee from DeMatha is now going to end up being a pretty high draft pick and one of Penn State's better players. It's unfortunate that we didn't get to watch KJ more this past season because of his injury, of course. But I think it's really that simple. He's been pretty high on Penn State. Penn State's been the favorite, I think, since that first visit. That wasn't a secret. It was just more kind of where does he stack up on the board. And like I said, give props to Sean for kind of figuring that out in late January, early February. And here we are. So interesting. 3 safeties now. We'll say 2.5, right?
2.5.
Obviously Matt Sieg. And we have David Davis obviously as a athlete, but I do expect him to start out at safety. And of course, Joey O'Brien's still out there. There's a bunch of safeties to keep an eye on, but here we go. This is certainly an absolute safety take for Penn State, and that's where he'll start his career.
Yeah, so you mentioned a consensus 3-star athlete, 660 overall in the On3 consensus. But I get a sense that there's 2 things I want to get into here. First off, the profile of a Penn State safety. Secondly, is this a function of where he's ranked, or is this a function of a lack of information and a lack of him kind of getting out on the recruiting circuit in a big way during his career? Because you mentioned not a lot of visits. Is that the same thing when it comes to not a lot of either information and or not a lot of exposure in the recruiting game? As a
Yeah, I mean, he came to the Under Armour camp last year in Baltimore. I think so. There's a laser time. He ran a 4.8 there that day, which I know like Penn State fans, like people 4.8. Oh, it sounds slow. Listen, everybody runs pretty much 2/10 slower on those later times at that Baltimore Under Armour camp. I mean, pretty much.
Also, it's outdoors. Like I don't want to get too, I don't want to bake in too many excuses, but having been there, I've never been there when it isn't windy and it's outdoors. So those things do affect, tenths of a second.
Yeah. And I mean, ran one time, ran a 4.8, right? There's a reason when we go to Penn State camps, they run twice at least. Sometimes many of them run 3 times. So that's the only actual like 40 time we have on him. And like I said, I mean, if he runs that at Penn State, it's probably a high 4.6, low 4.7 kind of number. That's just kind of the difference between hand times, laser times. So I don't want to overthink that too much. Penn State knows what they're doing. I have no doubts about that. We know he had a really good broad jump as well, measures explosion, right? Certainly seems like a physical player. T-Frank, you've watched him more film-wise than I have, at least recently. I mean, just what do you see?
Yeah, so I think the context is he's a Penn State safety. They wouldn't have taken him if he didn't have the physical skills. But it's kind of like linebacker a couple years ago. The freak level of athlete in the position sets a high watermark. So you look at what they've been able to do with like a guy like KJ Winston, or that we mentioned already, or a guy like Dejan Lane, guys that are difference-making athletes with all of the tools, all of the size. I don't think he measures to that. He's going to be a good athlete. I don't know that he is on that highest end, but we've seen guys that aren't the elite of the elite from a speed perspective be highly productive in this defense. And I think he's got more than enough speed to be good, but it is noticeable. I would say when you watch that on film and you're used to watching some of those other guys, or a corner that projects to that nickel safety role, he is a classic safety in this defense. And I think he's a boundary safety based on all those things because Ryan, 6'2", 33-inch arms. This is a dude who is a Anthony Poindexter slam dunk safety, isn't he?
Seems that way. Like I said, you've watched him more than I have. I've been so focused on trying to build these visitor lists and track everything down and X, Y, Z. Like I said, he went so long without visiting. Of course, we watched this film, what was it, back in January when everything was completed, like we always do. But as far as freshening up on little things, buddy, you know better than me as far as that, because we have been, man, there's like 20 some recruits on campus today. I'm trying to figure that out, buddy. Don't throw me loop.
No, I just mean like we know Anthony Poindexter likes big safeties, and so he absolutely fits into that bucket of this is a guy who fits the mold. And we put up that 3-star, and I wanted you to see the consensus across the board of this is a guy who's a 3-star, but in my opinion, somebody who can outperform that. Not every 3-star is built the same. So is that a 3-star that has limitations? Is that a 3-star that has some quirks in his game? And I would say watching his full game footage, some of these highlights here are indicative of his coverage skills for being a bigger safety that isn't the elite corner hybrid prospect. I think he's a good coverage player who can give you that versatility. In the DeMatha defense, he plays in the box quite a bit, but he also plays deep, and they use him in a very similar way to the way Penn State's going to use their safeties in this particular defense under Jim Knowles, where they're going to do a little bit of everything. They're going to cover in the slot. They're going to cover tight ends, maybe the select receivers here and there. They're going to have to play in the deep third. They're going to blitz. He shows the ability to do all of those things, but with that wide application of skills, I don't know that the details are there yet for him. So some of the things don't necessarily pop. Other than his size, there's a lot of he's good at everything, but doesn't have any defining traits to his game, which I actually like because I want to see guys that are exposed to a lot. And it shows me he's got a higher football IQ than somebody who's like, I'm going to put you in this specific role, and maybe you'll get 8 sacks in a season, but are you covering anybody? Or how are you being used? What do you know about football on the high school level? And then from the athleticism projection, which we talked about here, 6'2", 185, not the highest end athlete, but lots of room to grow. I think his 40 time can improve. I think his overall speed can improve, and he can be, I like using the choose your own adventure. Penn State could make him a 220-pound safety if they wanted to based on his frame. They usually like guys around 205 with this particular size. So you have the bulk and the mass to play the run, and also the coverage versatility to play in a lot of different coverage situations. So he provides you, I don't say a blank canvas, but he is so applicable to a bunch of different things. I think this is a good fit. Now, the question I have for you then, as we've talked about 2.5 safeties, I think Penn State's going to increase their amount of safeties they recruit anyway because of not just where they're going with Jim Knowles, but where they've been going recently. How do you view that with some of the higher end players like a Joey O'Brien left on the board and the cornerbacks they might be pursuing, who we know some of them filter into the safety room anyway? So how do you view the numbers in this class, given we don't know what the numbers mean anymore?
Yeah, that's a good point. You beat me to it there, bud. They have Zahir Cobb, obviously, is a player they have an official visit with later in the year. I'll be curious to kind of see how that impacts him. We know Joey O'Brien is a take no matter what. He's been one of Penn State's most important defensive prospects in this class for months now. So that's not going to change. Moving forward, I'd be curious to see if anybody kind of pops up as far as like a CJ Brunel. And don't get me wrong, I think CJ's probably more of a corner. There's been talk about, is he a corner? Is he a safety? We'll see. I mean, Caden Hall down in, Milton, I think it's Georgia, I want to say. Like he's a player they had interest in. There's a lot of national guys, right? So I don't see a ton of others really kind of popping up as far as absolute takes, and maybe that this will kind of change how they do, their official visits altogether. But we do know Joey will absolutely still be in the mix, and we'll see where things go. It's also important to say that that it is still commitment number 11, but if you do kind of look at the way the classes are set up already, it's substantially higher on I believe it's defensive. Is it defensive players? Actually, excuse me, real quick. I apologize, Steve Frank. I double checked. Is it defensive players or offensive players?
I think it's because they don't have a whole lot of offense, do they? Because they don't have a lot of offensive linemen.
Well, they have Jasir, they have Mickens. I'm sorry, I didn't want to mix that up in there. We have Kevin, 2 quarterbacks, Jasir. So yeah, it's a little more offensive heavy. But of course they've they picked up Peyton not that long ago, or like a week ago. They do have Julian Peterson too. I don't want to overlook Julian Peterson at cornerback. He's going to be a true corner. So it's a little bit more even than I was thinking off the top of my head. But look, there's a long way to go. A lot of things get sorted out, and of course June will do that all for us here. But to me right now, I would still see another corner or two. You hold a spot for Joey. And if there's a national guy that emerges, that they're really high on, maybe they can add an athlete tag or a +1, however you want to look at those kind of guys. Yeah. But at the moment, I think they're really happy with it. And let's also mention, like, having LeVar Keys, a teammate committed, like those guys should hold firm. That's always important. I don't see too many schools, trying to pluck Darrell and LeVar just because of those DeMatha ties, and there aren't too many DeMatha guys that have committed to Penn State and then caused drama with their recruitment. So I don't really see a whole lot of that coming down the road.
Yeah, I think when they get guys out of DeMatha, I've been a huge fan of them over the years. So it's a quality program to find good athletes to bring to the program that have a certain just that Maryland DC area with all of those schools down there that have the McDonoughs, the DeMathas. They all have this kind of brand of football that I think is really good for Penn State to have that in their backyard. If you're enjoying this conversation, we're talking about this and more on the Blue White Illustrated message board, recruiting, portal, all those things. You can subscribe right now for $1 and get access to all this information as the portal craziness goes on, as recruiting heats up towards the blue-white game. We're just 1 week out from the blue-white game. So if you join us now for $1, you get inside access to all this information that's churning first there. And then we bring it to you once it's official out here on the YouTube channel. And of course, after that, you can join us for a year. But there is 1 week left in our contest. If you subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel right now, you are entered to win a yearly subscription to Blue White Illustrated for free. So you can do either one. Join us for a week, or you could do both and subscribe here, and maybe you'll win for a year. All up to you. As always, like the video. That helps us out quite a bit. I know I'm doing here at the very end, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that if you subscribe and like and all those things, it helps us grow the channel and helps us get you more Penn State football information out there. Ryan, any final thoughts about Darrell Carey or the class of 2026 as we get out of here?
Very curious to see where they're at by the time OV start. Yeah, Alex Haskell's still out there. They're going to have a host of 2026 guys coming on campus next week for the blue-white game. So momentum's going right now. By the way, it's the 2027 class. It's all 3 offensive commits. That's what was up.
There we go.
It's darn classes. But anyway, just kind of seeing where things progress. Obviously, blue-white game is always a big recruiting weekend. So let's see if anything comes out of that. As I mentioned, Haskell. I do think Alex Haskell is going to probably make a decision here in the next couple of weeks. I wouldn't be shocked if, this 2026 class is around 12, maybe 13 or so heading into OV season, which, of course, this year kind of starts a little bit earlier than what we've been used to in May. So it's off and running, man. Like we said on the recruiting pod or the recruiting show like 2 weeks ago, like it is going to be absolute nonstop recruiting really from now until mid-July.
I always appreciate you stopping by to do these, because I know with all of that comes a lot of work, comes a lot of phone calls, text messages, all those things.
Where are my DeMatha colors today? I'm just realizing this looking at myself in the screen.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we'll be back the next time a commitment strikes here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Till then, for Ryan Snyder, I'm Thomas Fry Carr. We'll talk to you next time we get that here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel.